Hello, welcome to COS Indiana Live. There's never been a more important time in our history than now if you believe it's time to stand up and be free. Stay tuned and come back every Monday at 7 p.m. as our state director and host, Dale Parrish, present the need for self-governance. Our COS Indiana vision statement is to build a grassroots community of Hoosier citizens and legislators dedicated to the constitutional concept of self-governance. So, take it away, Dale.
Well, thank you, Maringo Mike, for that introduction. Appreciate it. Yes, my name's Dale Parrish. I am the state director for Convention of States here in Indiana. And if you follow us, you notice that Maringo Mike's introduction was a little bit different. And that's because we're slowly going to transition our broadcast to being more focused on the concept of self-governance. Self-governance has always been a part of a main part, quite honestly, of Convention of States. But I think you're going to see Convention of States nationally and here in Indiana. We're going to transition more to focusing on the concept of self-governance. So anyway, our first step is for Maringo Mike to kind of change his introduction, which he did this evening, and hopefully you did notice that. All right, let's very quickly let's go through the different segments of our broadcast that we'll be presenting to you this evening. The first segment will be the discussion topic segment, the topic of discussion. Now, sometimes we'll have a particular topic that we will, in fact, maybe discuss with the panel, or there'll be times when we'll invite a guest to come in and talk to us. I always try to interview all the people in leadership in Convention of States here in Indiana, and we're going to be focusing on that. As a matter of fact, in June we have some new district captains that are completing their training, and I'm going to try and bring in as many of those as possible and talk to them. Plus we're going to talk to some people that are engaged in in self-governance, okay, beyond Convention of States. So anyway, I hope we've got a lot of good things in the works being planned for this particular segment in the future. Now, after the discussion topic, I'll bring up my PowerPoint and I'll share some general information with you about resources that we have available to us here in Indiana, as well as some numbers on how we're doing in the state. After the general information, we'll take a little time to talk about the Convention of States basics. These are the three tenets that our program is based upon. So we'll cover the Convention of States basics, then try my best to recognize those individuals that have joined us this evening and are viewing. And if you are a viewer and you would like to submit a question or make a comment, please feel free to do that in the chat section. I'll do my best to try and get those on the screen. And so then we'll close things up, wrap things up, kind of tell you what we have planned for our next broadcast next Monday, and get things wrapped up. Now, I also want to take the opportunity here to once again announce that we're going to be conducting a virtual summit here in Indiana. It's called the Indiana Convention of States Leadership Summit. And this is going to be next Saturday, as a matter of fact, June 13th at 10 a.m. I said this is a virtual summit, so we're going to be Zooming it. And we have as our featured speaker for the summit will be Mark Meckler. Mark is, of course, one of the co-founders of Convention of States and currently the president of Convention of States. So we'll have Mark address us and then do a little Q&A with him. And then we have some major awards that we want to hand out to a couple individuals here in Indiana. So should be a good time. Like I said, now important here is that if you're not in leadership, you'll be able to view this via streaming, live streaming, and you'll have to go to our YouTube channel, COS Indiana, and through there you'll be able to stream and view the summit in progress. Excuse me, I got something in my eye here. But now, if you're in leadership, then you'll be actually participating in the conference call. So next Saturday, June 13th, 10 a.m. All right. Well, we have tonight with us, we have COS volunteer Debbie Stewart is going to be bringing us another chapter in the series Constitutional Literacy. So I want to, without further ado, I want to bring Debbie on here and get her set up. And there she is. Hi, Debbie.
Hi, Dale.
Good. Glad to have you tonight. Thank you for coming on.
It's good to be here.
Now, Deb, this chapter is on the free exercise of religion, part 2, right?
That is correct.
And you delivered part 1 the last time you were on. Okay, so take it away.
Okay, so we met 2 weeks ago, and I talked about the free exercise of religion. And just real quick, the free exercise of religion, the free exercise clause is the second clause of the First Amendment. And we talked about when can the government override a person's right to exercise a religion. So there's this balancing act that goes on between a governmental interest and a person's right to exercise their religion. And we talked about a 4-part Sherbert test that was made up by the Supreme Court to help them determine that. So part 2 is today. We're going to talk a little bit more about what happened later by something called the Smith case. And so the Smith case was, before we get into that though, we want to understand what was the Smith case or the Smith decision, and I'll go into that in a minute. And then what were the implications based on that for our religious freedom now? And then lastly, we'll talk about what are some other alternatives. So basically, the Sherbert test, we're going to find out, isn't really being used anymore because of a decision that was made by Justice Scalia with the Smith decision. But before we get into that, just want to go over a couple terms here with you. We're going to talk about something called the neutral law of general applicability. And this is a law that does not address religion directly, even though it might have religious implications. So just most of our laws in our country are neutral laws of general applicability. And then religious exemption is freedom from the requirements of law based on your freedom of religion. So you can exempt out of certain things because of that free exercise clause. And then lastly, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, or what we call RFRA, was something that a committee came up with after the Smith decision. And we'll talk about what that is too. Okay? All right. So the Smith decision, is that where we're at, Dale? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. In 1990, there was a case where there were 2 Native Americans that worked for a company, and they were drug counselors. Well, while they were drug counselors, they got busted for taking peyote, which is a hallucinogenic drug. So the company fired them, this was in Oregon, and told them they couldn't have unemployment benefits because they broke the rules. Well, these 2 Native Americans said, well, wait, we are going to sue you because we think we should get unemployment compensation because we're going to claim the free exercise of religion because our Native American beliefs are that this peyote is part of our religious ceremony. So it's kind of ironic that the two drug counselors are actually taking drugs on the job. So it's kind of funny. But
now, peyote, that is a drug, right? That
it's a hallucinogenic drug, yeah.
and
they were taking it while at work.
Where does that drug come from? I remember. Do you know how that's produced, or is it from a plant, or?
That is a great question. I don't know that.
All right, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I just.
Have you heard of that drug before?
Oh yes. I've heard of that. I'm trying to think. I was just trying to think where the drug was, where it originated, or what source it comes from. But that's okay.
Well, you look that up and let us know.
Right. Okay.
All right. So with this case, what they should have done with this case is applied the 4-part Sherbert test, which the Supreme Court came up with and they had been using. And it was a decent alternative to looking at the founder's original intent. 4 questions. And if they would have went through the 4-part Sherbert test, they would have came up with the same answer, which was, there's no way you're getting your money. You can't claim the free exercise clause here. But something unusual happened. Justice Scalia used he came up with the same result, but he used a different form of reasoning. And his form of reasoning totally changed the way we deal with the free exercise clause. And what he said was, he ruled that the free exercise of religion could not be used to challenge the constitutional ability of a neutral law of general applicability. Meaning that before, you could basically exempt for religion for almost anything, but no longer, only when the law is aimed at religion can you exempt yourself. So the result of that was Scalia reinterpreted the past free exercise clause precedents and said they were based on the freedom of speech mixed with freedom of the press. So he basically said the free exercise clause takes a secondary role to these other freedoms. And so the bottom line is no person can claim a religious exemption anymore from a neutral general law. Well, that's a lot of our laws in this country. And so that really took a lot of the importance of the free exercise clause as claiming that for an exemption. Now, and this was really unusual because Justice Scalia has always been an original intent guy. He's always been very constitutional. So everybody was very surprised by this decision. And not only that, but one of the cases that he used as a precedent, the Gobitis case, was actually, he quoted that as a precedent, but 3 years later, that case was reversed. And so he actually quoted a case as a precedent that had already been reversed because they decided it was a bad decision. So everybody's, what are you doing? But the majority opinion ruled there. I think it was the 5-4 vote. And so now the result is that we can't claim the free exercise of religion clause like we used to be able to.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So now what? So Michael Ferris, who wrote this curriculum, he got together with a group of people and they put a committee together to come up with the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which we call RFRA. And they came up with this act, and basically it would reinstall the 4-part Sherbert test, and then you can apply the exemption to neutral laws of general applicability. And it worked great for a couple years until 1997, the Supreme Court said it was unconstitutional. So now we're back to square one. Now they said it was unconstitutional, but the federal government can still use that. So I'll get to that in just a second. So now we have to look at other alternatives. So here's some of the things that we can do. The first thing we can do is each state can also come up with an equivalent for RFRA in their state. And so, for example, Indiana in 2015, they did draw up a Indiana RFRA law, and Governor Mike Pence signed it into law, made it a bill, and then he got a lot of flack for that because the LGBT community felt like, no, it would discriminate. So several months later, there was an amendment added that would protect the LGBT community.
Yeah, I remember the uproar over that. Yes.
Yes, talking about protesting, that was all going on in Carmel.
All right, yeah.
Okay, so the second option is some state constitutions already have protections in there, so they could use those. Third, you can have hybrids, so they might say, well, we're going to use the free exercise of religion, but we're also going to say, well, that has to do with the freedom of speech. So they might use other First Amendment rights mixed together. But what they were finding is that doesn't really work because the free exercise clause really isn't seen as very effective. So the fourth alternative really is just using like, well, I'm going to use an exemption based on the freedom of association then. You know, we have a freedom to associate peacefully, assemble peacefully. And then the fifth is RFRA at the federal level. So there is, and this is, now this book was written in 2014, so I think this is still correct, but you can still use that RFRA at the federal level, but most cases are state cases, so. And so really, in conclusion then, from this whole thing is that getting back to what we've said before is that we really need to ensure that we are going to get justices appointed and voted in that are going to follow the rule of law. They're going to follow the original intent of the Constitution. They need to uphold our freedoms as intended by the founding fathers. And maybe, who knows, maybe the Supreme Court will overturn the Smith decision at some point in time.
All right. I'm going to try something I've never done before here, Debbie. Okay? And I'm going to try it with you.
Uh-oh. That's scary.
Hey, Siri, where does the drug peyo come from?
Okay, I found this on the web for where does the drug pal come from. Check it out.
Well, it's not gonna give me a good answer here.
I think
It's not gonna give me a short answer. All right.
Peyote.
Are you doing the same thing?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's a plant. I think it comes from a plant.
I got it in a bowl here. I can't tell what it is though.
All right.
Parts of the cactus.
Oh, all right.
Well,
See?
yeah, I didn't know that. Good job.
We just learned so much on COS Indiana Live.
Yeah. Parts of the
Okay.
cactus crown, actually. So, okay, good.
We got to move on. And Debbie, thank you very much. Now, I also wanted you to mention that your next chapter is going to be the freedom of speech and press, which that'll be very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
And right now, everyone, we have Debbie scheduled to come back on July 13th, our July 13th broadcast. So we'll be looking forward to her being with us then, right?
You're such a generous boss to give me a whole month off. I just owe you everything.
Well, things can change, as you know.
I'm always flexible.
All right, Debbie. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Thank you.
All right.
Yay. Debbie Stewart, COS volunteer, Debbie Stewart. I tell you, I really enjoyed Debbie doing this constitutional literacy series for us. It's very, very good. Okay, let me bring up my PowerPoint presentation, and we'll get into the some of the different things that I can provide for you here. And I want to give you a full screen, so I'm implementing the slideshow option here. So let's get busy here. Resources that we have available to us here in Indiana. The main resource is our national website, conventionofstates.com. That is everyone, if you're going to join Convention of States, which we want you to do, the very first step is to go to this national website, conventionofstates.com. Wealth of information. Open an account, become a supporter, and like I said, it's just a wealth of information on this website. Embedded in the national website is our state website page, conventionofstates.com/Indiana. Also on social media, where the main platform is Facebook. Convention of States Indiana is our state Facebook page. This broadcast is coming to you through that Facebook page. So that I strongly recommend you go to our state Facebook page and like it so you can keep up to date with us. YouTube channel, COS Indiana. And I mentioned earlier, now this is where we're going to be live streaming the upcoming summit, Indiana COS Leadership Summit, coming up this next Saturday, the 13th at 10 a.m. And you can stream that summit through this YouTube channel, COS Indiana. Now we have other things on this channel. We have some narrated PowerPoint presentations. We have recordings of these broadcasts that we do. We also have links to a podcast that our legislative liaison, Paul Phillips, who's appeared on this broadcast many times. But Paul does this podcast. It's called The Free to Be Free, and they're very, very good podcasts. I really, really recommend that you check these out. And we have on our YouTube channel, then we have a link to each of these podcasts. We're also on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, many other platforms. So if you're into social media, you shouldn't have any problem finding us. Just some quick numbers on how we're doing in the state. In 2019, we surpassed 41,000 supporters, been growing tremendously. And I'll tell you, so far in 2020, our growth rate has really, really been strong. And I think it's in part due to some of the things, obviously, that have been going on in our country. The virus, the protests. I think this is driving a lot of people to our organization. So our goal for 2020 is 52,000. We have about 2,900 volunteers. We have around 40 or so individuals in leadership positions. Now this is very important. If you want to get involved in Convention of States, which I hope you do, obviously go to this. Here's this website again, conventionofstates.com, and open an account. That makes you a supporter, and that's important. Now, if you have some time and you would like to get more involved, go to the menu selection, take action, and drop down to where it says become a leader and look at the different volunteer positions that we have available. And I would stress that you look specifically at the estimated amount of time involved in each of those positions. So you can find, hopefully, you can find, if you're interested, a leadership position that would coincide with the amount of time that you have to devote to Convention of States. So that's where you can find this information, and we strongly urge that you do that. All right. The Convention of States basics. I'm going to go through this very quickly since we're a little bit behind schedule. There are three tenets: the problem, the solution, and the plan. Now the problem, basically the problem is with our federal government is that it lacks the will and the courage to address certain basic structural issues that we believe need to be addressed. Now, we further define these issues into three major abuses that we claim in abuses by the federal government. The first one is our national debt, and what's being done, which is very little to nothing, what's being done to address that. You know, it was over 23 trillion, and no telling what it's going to be now due to the pandemic. So don't know what that number is going to finally be, but obviously it's going to be higher. So the national debt, the regulatory crisis, much more needs to be done with limiting regulations, specifically on the creation of regulations and how they get created. So the administrative state, but now the fourth branch of government, really needs to be held in control. The final has to do with state sovereignty, and we believe that a key part of this is the career politician. So we're stressing and hoping for to address term limits. All right, what's our solution? The solution is right in Article 5 of our Constitution. We're not making this up, it's right in Article 5. Article 5 describes two methods to amend the Constitution. And let me go through each one real quickly here. The first method, the one we're used to seeing, is where 2/3 of Congress propose an amendment, and then it has to be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures, or 38 states. So that's how our amendments have been created so far. Well, there is a second method right in Article 5. Again, we're not making this up. But in this second method, 2/3 of the state legislatures can apply to hold a convention of states for the purpose of proposing amendments to the Constitution. Any proposed amendments then would have to be ratified, just as in method 1, by 3/4 of the states, or 38 states. Now, 2/3 of the state legislatures, that's 34 states. So we need 34 states to make application to hold this convention to propose amendments that would address the abuses that we've identified in the problem area. So what's our plan to bring this about? We have our plans in two parts. The application strategy, where we need 34 states to apply. See, the applications, the subject matter of the applications have to be the same. So we've designed the application, and we want the application to address fiscal restraints, limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and term limits. Now, the other part of the plan is to make this happen is mobilizing the grassroots. And when I say the grassroots, I'm talking about you, me, and our state legislators. Mobilizing the grassroots to make this happen. And we have a tremendous amount of momentum going. Now the virus, the lockdown has kind of taken some of the steam out this year. We were looking forward to having a big year in 2020, but we'll come back. We're going to come back on this. Like I said, we've gotten very, very strong enrollment in new supporters. So I think we're going to come back on this. And legislatively, we're in all 50 states. So we're going to come back and we'll pick up the ball here very soon and get going again. So love to have you join us in this effort. And like I said, if you're interested, go to that main website, conventionstates.com, and open an account and get involved. All right, that's it on the basics now, and let's go to see the viewers that we have this evening. I'm going to try and show this. Susan Lyon. Susan does our state newsletter, and her husband Rick is our state events coordinator. They are, as a matter of fact, I had both of them on not too long ago. They're our first husband and wife team. So thanks for tuning in. I can't get all of your comment on here. Let me see if I can read it. We love the idea of highest type of self-governance, a true representative government that recognizes all individual rights and whenever they infringe upon the rights of others. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and I see Susan was following our conversation where she says peyote. That's how you spell peyote. Okay, is a small spineless cactus with psychoactive alkaloids, particularly mescaline. Okay. All right. Thank you, Susan, for that. I really started something here tonight. Another individual that, another gentleman from our leadership group, Jerry Rowe, saying hi to everyone tonight. So thank you all for tuning in and joining us tonight. All right, let me then now bring up my picture that I used for my closing. But before I do that, I want two other things I want to mention. Once again, is our Indiana Convention of States Leadership Summit coming up this Saturday, June 13th, 10 a.m., live streamed through our YouTube channel, COS Indiana. So if you can, please join us. If you can't make it, there will be a recording and we'll post it on our Facebook page, state Facebook page. So once again, June 13th, next Saturday, 10 a.m. Now, I also want to mention next Monday's broadcast, we're going to be, we're going to start interviewing some of our new district captains. And I have a young man lined up for our next broadcast, which will be, of course, then on June 15th. His name's Chad Michael. And Chad's, like I said, he's one of our new district captains and just about completing his training. So we'll have an opportunity to sit down and meet Chad and see what's on his mind. Okay. All right. I want to wrap things up this evening then with my favorite quote from Mark Meckler, our president, who's going to be our featured speaker at the summit coming up next Saturday. But Mark has always said, you know, there's a fundamental question facing our country today. And the question is not what we should do. The question is who will decide. So yes, the question facing us is a two-word question, very simply, who decides? And I think, you know, with what's going on in our country right now, I think this is even becoming more and more important. And getting more people involved in our government, and which falls right into the theory and the concept that we believe in, and that's self-governance. And we're going to try on this broadcast to recognize more and more those individuals that are implementing and living this concept of self-governance, and hopefully that will inspire more of us to get involved. So it really does come down to very simply who decides. So we believe it's we the people. And with that in mind, I want to close things out for this evening and thank you all for tuning in, and have a good evening. Good night, everyone.